Hi, this is Swapnil Bhartia, and welcome to TFR Newsroom. And today we have with us Dirk Herrmann, Senior Product Manager at Hat Quay. When you look at private registries, there have been a lot. So, what role is Quay playing not only for OpenShift but also the whole ecosystem?
Quay is one of the many options out there in the registry space, but it's way more than just a plain registry. So we call it a trusted open source container registry platform. So intentionally we call it platform because it goes far beyond the registry. Yeah, so it runs everywhere, it works with everything, but of course it works best with OpenShift. So one of the key strengths of Quay is its scalability, because effectively we are using the same code base as we ship it as the on-prem product also for the hosted service, which is one of the 5 biggest registries out there. So Quay is the hosted software as a service platform, and it's the same registry, it's the same code, it's the same configuration, it's the same bits. And Quay is, as I said, it's more than just a registry. So it goes far beyond just storing images or managing images over time. It features an built-in vulnerability scanning we just enhanced with the latest release. And it has a very strong focus on governance and security controls with a couple of features. And it's really built for large-scale customer deployments, especially if those deployments are federated across the entire globe, multiple data centers, many clusters, multiple regions, and stuff like this. Yeah, so this is the key strength. So it's more than just a plain registry.
Can you talk a bit about the governance piece of it? Security is quite very well understood, and since most of the time, the big challenge with container images is that you really don't, because when you bundle something in a container, you don't really know where it is coming from. There can be hardening, it can be changed. So it can be also issue of security plus compliance, especially if you're running a lot of, mixing a lot of open source software there with different licenses. So you really have no control over it. So can you talk about this piece? And is there anything that has to do with governance?
At Red Hat Summit in 2017, we announced the Container Health Index as part of the Red Hat Container Catalog, and I'm the guy behind those. And basically what we try to achieve with the Container Health Index is we try to make complex security information consumable by non-security experts. And basically what we did, we simplified complex security data to a single letter grade. And the goal behind was that we want to prove to our customers that we are doing a great job on keeping our Red Hat content and the content provided by our partners free of critical vulnerabilities, keep them up to date. So if there is a vulnerability coming out which impacts some of the images, then we immediately start to automatically rebuild those images. So this is what we do on the Red Hat side. On the Quay side, we introduced a couple of features which allows you to do a more governance-centric approach, such as the repository mirroring. So in contrast to other solutions out there, which allow to that developers can pull arbitrary content from the internet and the registry just acts as a proxy cache, we intentionally decided to use an explicit whitelisting of trusted and approved content as part of the repo mirroring feature set to really ensure that only vetted or validated content is allowed to be synchronized or mirrored into the registry. And starting from there, then you can do all the lifecycle environment promotion. You can allow the usage of those images from different clusters using the fine-grained RBAC model of Quay. And of course, the scanning happens on any time. So immediately after an image arrives in the registry, it's automatically scanned via the built-in vulnerability scanning powered by Claire. And this scanning is supposed to be used and could be used across the entire lifecycle. Yeah, so it starts with the content is synchronized into the registry or mirrored into the registry, and then the developer builds something on top of it and pushes the image back in the registry. Immediately, the scan results are available to him as well, even already during the pipeline. And then we even expose the security metadata to the OpenShift console, which is typically used by developers throughout the entire software development lifecycle. So this is how we ensure, and the different pieces are coming together in a very holistic way on managing the software across the entire lifecycle. And Quay is involved in nearly every step of the lifecycle. And that's why it's so important, or that's why the registry itself plays an important role in the security or going even further in the DevSecOps context.
If you look at Red Hat, what Red Hat has done really incredible is that, of course, you guys support a lot of open source projects. But when you look at open source, it's okay, day one, you get the code, you put it there, but what about day two, So what I see with Red Hat is, the way you integrate open source projects into your own server, like if you look at OpenShift or whatever, so you make it very easy for customers to use those open source projects. So talk a bit about how is Quay integrated with OpenShift so as to, while you leverage all those open source components, but you make it very, very easier for customer to just, use it.
First of all, I would like to mention that Quay has been proprietary until last year. So basically, Quay has been initially a hosted service, which has been introduced in 2014. Then they got acquired by CoreOS, and later CoreOS got acquired by Red Hat. And then, so the scanning components of Claire has been open source all the time. So it has been a vulnerability scanning engine built for Quay, used by Quay and Quay.io, but also by several other open source and proprietary products or projects, such as VMware Harbor, the AWS ECR registry, and stuff like this. And we open sourced Quay, because we have a 100% open source commitment. And we also, we have a 100% open source centric or upstream first development model now with Quay, which means the source code is available, the builds are available. We develop against the upstream branch. So all the upcoming releases are visible to the community. They can start playing around with. And then we build the final deliverables. We push them to Quay.io to test them at scale. And once this has been stabilized, then we finally build the product and ship it to our customers. So open source is part of our DNA, obviously. So we are Red Hat. We are the #1 open source vendor. And Quay is just another example of how we approach this whole thing. So this is pretty important. On the OpenShift side, Quay is one of the registry options. So OpenShift also features its built-in or internal registry, which is pretty well integrated into OpenShift. So it has a seamless user experience. You can use it out of the box. Most of the stuff which happens in the registry is entirely transparent to the user, which is quite powerful, especially if you want to just start to use Kubernetes and deploy stuff. So this is very convenient for them. But of course, if you then run large clusters, many clusters federated across different data centers and stuff like this, then of course, the need or the value coming out of Quay starts to increase. And basically, a year ago, we decided that the OpenShift or the Kubernetes integration is our #1 priority. And basically, we invested a lot, and this current release and the past 2 releases also reflected. We invested a lot in 2 major areas. So the first one is Quay needs to run perfectly fine on OpenShift. And the key here is Quay is a containerized application. It runs on any infrastructure, both on-prem, public cloud, on any container runtime, on any Kubernetes distribution. But of course, it runs best on OpenShift. So this has been our goal, and we can leverage all the existing great capabilities which are included in OpenShift. So the Quay operator, which has been one of the first operators we introduced, is supposed to really streamline the user experience for the deployment and the ongoing management of Quay if it's running on Kubernetes and OpenShift. And this is one of the 3 operators we have. In the meantime, another operator we introduced with Quay 3.2, so with the previous release, has been the container security operator. Effectively, this is an operator which runs on all the Kubernetes or OpenShift clusters Quay is serving content to. And what it does, it watches all the pod objects. And each time a new pod is created or changed, then it fetches the vulnerability data from Quay and Claire and stores it in a custom resource. And starting from there, we leverage this information stored in the Kubernetes custom resource and visualize it in the OpenShift console. So this is one of the benefits coming out of OpenShift. So compared with plain vanilla Kubernetes, which doesn't have a UI or console, but it's part of OpenShift. So we can leverage even the extended capabilities of OpenShift. And the new operator we introduced with the most recent version 3.3 is the Quay Bridge operator. And what the Bridge operator does, it effectively automates some of the common workflows. So within OpenShift, if a user creates a new project, then it automatically creates an organization in Quay. It automatically creates robot accounts, it exchanges the secrets and stores it in the OpenShift on the OpenShift side, and the same with new applications and stuff it is. So in the meantime, we have 3 operators, and this also demonstrates our commitment on Kubernetes operators, where we believe this is the best and probably the only answer to run complex application on top of Kubernetes. And Quay is not an exception here. So entire OpenShift is built on top of operators, and we do the same with Quay. So we still have the container images, but the operators are the big focus area for us. And this is probably very valuable also for the community, because what we do is we develop initially, of course, primarily against OpenShift, but we also try to ensure that those operators also run on non-OpenShift Kubernetes distributions. So with this new release of the setup operator, for example, we added a couple of points which are not required if you run Quay on OpenShift, but are required if you run Quay on other Kubernetes distributions. So this is our commitment to the open source community.
Tell us about some of the highlights, some of the new features of this release.
So basically, we had 2 major features and a bunch of smaller but high-value features. So I already mentioned the Quay bridge operator, which runs on the OpenShift and integrates Quay into the various OpenShift workflows, somewhat similar to the existing internal registry experience. Another big feature we introduced as tech preview for now is an entirely, completely overhauled version of the vulnerability scan engine, Claire version 4. And for those who know that we skipped Claire version 3, which has been the latest development branch in the past, because we really we realized that all this stuff we want to bring into Claire in future versions of Quay requires a significant change of both the Quay architecture, the data model, the Claire architecture, the data model, and the way how Claire is designed and interacts with Quay. So moving towards a manifest-based approach is one of the things we introduced with this new version. So Claire version 4 is an entirely overhauled version with a new architecture. It also has an entirely new immutable API on a manifest-centric API. And from an end customer standpoint, probably the most interesting feature of coming out of Claire v4 is that we introduced support for programming languages. So in the past, Claire has been limited to operating system package managers for various distributions such as Debian, Ubuntu, Amazon Linux, Alpine, or of course Red Hat Enterprise Linux as well. And now we introduced support for Python packages as the initial programming language we picked, because Quay is written in Python. And hopefully we can add other programming language over time. And then we introduced a couple of other features. So I already mentioned the container security operator, which brings the Quay Claire vulnerability information to OpenShift, stores it in the CR, and then shows it in the console. We again enhanced the different views within the OpenShift console. So we added list views, we added the views on the developer console and stuff like this. And this has been shipped with the most recent OpenShift version we released 1 week earlier, but has been developed by the Quay team. We introduced LDAP filtering, which is a feature which is needed if a common or corporate LDAP or Active Directory setup is used. We significantly enhanced the Quay builder tag rules or tag definitions, which is now way more flexible than it has been in the past. And then we introduced another interesting feature we originally developed for Quay.io. So keep in mind, as I said at the beginning, Quay, or the code we are using to build the product, is the same as we are using it as Quay.io. And obviously Quay.io is probably a different scale than many customers are running Quay at. But at Quay.io, we ran into some, let's say, resource constraints or performance constraints, and we decided, okay, we want to move out the logs out of the database into an Elasticsearch stack. Instead, we developed it for Quay.io, we battle tested it there, and now we made it as a product feature because we know that we have several customers who are running Quay nearly at the same scale as we are running it at Quay.io. So we have a lot of very large deployments of Quay. So this is another powerful feature. And related to this is we introduced a log exporting feature, which allows to export several subset of the log files on an organization or repository level. We introduced the support for OCI MIME types as a tech preview feature. And probably pretty interesting for developers is, since we are working closely with both the upstream community who is developing the OCI artifact spec, but we're also working closely with the Helm community, we introduced an experimental status of the OCI artifact spec, which allows to store arbitrary content types in the registry and interact with it the same way as you would do with container images. And the benefit coming out of it, this means that starting from now, you can store and manage Helm charts in the same way as you could do with images, so you can push and pull them. But please note again, this is an experimental feature both on the Quay side and on the Helm side, because this artifact spec is still not finalized yet, but we are part of it. So the co-founder of Hat Quay is one of the maintainers of this artifact spec, and we are working with the community to finalize the spec, and then probably we will be the first registry which has the full spec support included in it. So those are, on a very high level, the key features we introduced last week.
You touch upon some of the work that's going on. Can you talk a bit about the roadmap of how it looks like for 2020? Of course, the release, I think, is like you release it when it's ready, so there's no specific release dates. But what does the release cadence look like, number one? Number two is, what does your roadmap look like?
So the release cadence, we have a 2-year life cycle on a major release level, and typically we ship minor releases every 3 months. So this is the life cycle policy of Quay. But we already know today that the next version of Quay will take a little bit longer than the usual 3 months, simply because we have to do a massive refactoring of Quay. So one of the items we need to focus on is a Python v2 to v3 migration. And if you are involved in other software development projects, you know about the challenges of such a big, let's say, code change or refactoring of the entire code base. So that's why the next release probably will take a little bit longer. But just looking at the roadmap, I defined 3 different or key priorities on the roadmap for the next, and we already defined it 1 year back, but probably for the next 2 or 3 releases, they still stand. So the number one priority is the deeper integration into the Kubernetes platform. So those are all the things I mentioned at the beginning. So those are primarily the operators. We want to enhance both the Quay operator, the bridge operator, and the setup operator. So we want to bring the registry more closely into the Kubernetes platform. So this is one focus area. The second focus area is really a focus on day 2 experience. So all the operational aspects. And again, this is related to operators. This is the reason why operators have been invented or built and why we are heavily using them, because we really want to ensure that the day 2 management of Quay or any other application is kind of seamless, similar to a cloud-like experience as you are using those services on a public cloud environment. And then, of course, there's a third bucket, which are all the great registry and scanning enhancements I already mentioned. So the upcoming specs we are involved with or are working on, the Claire scanning enhancements I mentioned. So there are a couple of great features. So currently, the next release of Quay, so Quay 3.4, which is probably targeted for, let's say, the third quarter of this year, we will again focus on the integration into the OpenShift Kubernetes platform, which means we will start leveraging various OpenShift components such as the logging and monitoring stack, stuff like this. We have a very great community contribution, which is currently work in progress, which allows us to do an integrated OAuth integration into the OpenShift OAuth backend, which is pretty powerful as well. We will again enhance the existing console views within OpenShift to show more and more valuable Quay data. And on the Claire side, we have a couple of features we are working on. So one of the top priorities there is that we finally will introduce an air-gapped support for Claire, which means that starting with probably this next release, users can use both Quay and Claire in air-gapped environment, which is pretty important for many customers in both North America and EMEA. Hopefully, we will get the container health index I mentioned at the very beginning into Quay and Claire as well. Because after we built the initial prototype for the container health index, which has been used for many years to show the container health index weight in the container catalog, we moved to a Claire-based scan backend, and we are using Claire since many years already as the backend for the Container Health Index. And based on the internal work we have done, we can bring those internal contributions into the product and then finally introduce the Container Health Index grades and principles into Quay and Claire as well, which could be pretty powerful because, again, the primary goal was to make it more or better consumable to non-security experts. For example, it's way easier to show on a dashboard single letter grade than a complex amount of information for security metadata, which is probably harder to read and understand. And we will introduce a couple of other features. So one of the other top priority features probably for the end of the year is a better quota reporting management and then enforcement over time. So this is a phased approach. This is one of the bigger initiatives we are working on, and probably we will just start with reporting and then enhance the capabilities. I mentioned the Helm support, which is now marked as experimental, but of course the goal is to make Helm and other artifacts a first-class citizen of Quay, as we did already a few years back with the Quay application registry, which has been used to store Helm v2 charts in the past. We will hopefully add additional programming language, as I mentioned as well. We plan to enhance the repository mirroring, and another focus there is, I already mentioned the air-gapped support for Claire. We hopefully can expand the feature set, especially for air-gapped environments, with a better way of getting content from a hosted Quay into an air-gapped Quay to serve content, starting from there to disconnected or air-gapped OpenShift clusters running in customer environments. And then there's one other feature we are working on actively with the community, which is the Notary v2 stuff. On Quay.io, we already have a Docker Notary-based signing implementation called Apostille, but we decided to not ship it as part of the product because it's hard to maintain. And that's why we've been excited to hear that now, as a cross-vendor effort, we started to work on this upcoming version of Notary, which hopefully allows us to bring a more sophisticated signing solution to both Quay and OpenShift over time. So those are, on a high level, the items we are working on for the next 6 to 9 or probably even 12 months.
Thanks for sharing that roadmap, Dirk. And thank you so much for taking time out and sitting down with me here to talk with Quay. And I look forward to talk to you again when the next release is out. Thank you.